And welcome to An Hour with the Candidates on LPTV, a production of the Libertarian Party. Dan Fishman, executive producer. My name is Pat Ford, and I currently serve as the chair of the Jo Jorgensen campaign for Rhode Island. Just want to take a moment, if you will, tonight to have a slightly different opening for the show, a little bit of a conversation. This is usually where I talk about the purpose of the show, but I want to preface that by focusing on one concept: teamwork. After nearly 6 weeks of petitioning at parks, shopping centers, DMVs, the back of an occasional pickup truck, getting a big heck of chunk of signatures, it also became clear that, like so many other affiliates across the country, we were running into a roadblock. The simple things can be overcome: weather, the local opposition. But here in the midst of the dread COVID, if you will, the plague as we became to call it in the campaign, we're also focusing on a polarization of the political force that hadn't been seen before. Republicans, Democrats not wanting this election to be an exercise in democracy, but seeing it simply as, well, it's time for their team. And it's all about, as Jerry Seinfeld once put it so eloquently, it's all about rooting for laundry. But this was not to be an election. It was to be either a coronation or an overthrow. And simply refused to acknowledge, whether it was in Maine, where I spent some time, or Rhode Island, where I've obviously live, that the ballot was a place for all candidates of all political philosophies to project their viewpoint for the American public to decide. No, it was decided that the duopoly was going to decide. When we do this show, we often talk about the need for affiliates in different parts of the country to get to know rising candidates, folks who are running for political office, from everything from town council to metropolitan mass transportation districts to the Senate, the Congress, what we refer to euphemistically as down ballot candidates. In this case, we're obviously working to get Jo Jorgensen and Spike Cohen their 50-state ballot access that they so richly deserve, that they've worked for, and the American people need to have an opportunity for opposing voices. So I want to just extrapolate for a moment on teamwork. Sensing the challenge before us, fresh off of ballot challenges and ballot issues in places as disparate as Maine and Alabama, we had a family of libertarians show up at our doorstep. Volunteers, working in conjunction with the 30 or so volunteers that had taken petition forms from Rhode Island out into the field, some of them brand new to our party and to our movement. But the party itself also brought to bear the resources that we needed to get us over that final hump, if you will. And so I just want to take a moment to celebrate teamwork and its finest moment. Whether it be at 4 o'clock at an IHOP, which I'm sorry, folks, is the new pancake house of the Libertarian Party. This Waffle House stuff has got to end. Or whether it be folks who have spent a lifetime working for ballot access, and I'm talking specifically about Bill Redpath and his commitment to candidates around the country, that while at times we may have philosophical disagreements, even though we all operate under a statement of principles that is really an overriding roadmap, if you will, to the libertarian moment. And while we challenge each other constantly in terms of campaigns or issues, the one overriding concept that we cannot deny is that we are all family, a fractious one at times. But at moments like this, I want to celebrate that, because if it wasn't for the folks from New Hampshire coming down to make those extra road trips over the last couple of days to get our ballots out to the towns, if it wasn't for folks like Bill Redpath, who, again, like I say, has dedicated a life to making sure that all of us, all the candidates that we talk about tonight on the air, all the candidates that we met over the last few months, have the opportunities they need to get on the ballot so they can be heard. If it wasn't for, let's just say one example, one young man who's recently become involved in the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island, who came on his break as a restaurant server to make sure that we had our petitions that he'd been working on for weeks at 10 o'clock last night, we would not have been successful. So I'm just going to ask people tonight, if you hear this show tonight, or if you hear it in the coming weeks, that you take a moment to reflect on the notion of the libertarian movement as family, as a team. If you can't participate directly in petitioning or door knocking or the masked page that our good friend Jackie from New Hampshire sent out that got us some extra folks to show up at our Camp IHOP to sign petitions literally at night. If you can't participate in all that, I'm just going to ask all of you to take a moment over the next few days and contribute to the party. We know that financially these are challenging times for all of us. In our own ways, we've each had to overcome a lot of obstacles over the last 6 or 8 months. But we're entering a new stage in the campaign, in this campaign circle, the circle of life, as we call it here in Rhode Island. And now, of course, we're facing legal challenges. The party dedicated significant resources around this country to individual candidates to make sure that they were on the ballot. But now in places like Texas, we're facing challenges at the highest level, in this case, the Texas Supreme Court, to maintain the ballot access that so many of you have fought so damn hard for. And so many resources have been brought to bear. So I implore you, honor the spirit of the folks in Maine and Alabama, and in this week's case, Rhode Island. Honor that spirit, honor that dedication. Folks who drove at the drop of a hat hours simply to show up and say, how can I help? Honor that by some type of donation, what you can afford, a few dollars. We've been blessed over the last few weeks when we've moved this show to the Libertarian Party Facebook page. We've gotten 9, 10, 11,000 plus views of this simple hour, this simple conversation that's going to take place in just a few minutes. If everybody gave a few dollars to the legal fund that is now going to have to be brought to bear to defend our work and our rightful place as part of the body politic here in the United States, if everybody gave a few dollars, we can carry the battle forward. You can do so at p.org/legal. The funds will be dedicated to the legal defense, if you will, of candidacies around this nation throughout the libertarian philosophy. And again, as I mentioned earlier, throughout that libertarian family, that libertarian team that has shown some of its finest moments in the last few weeks. I implore you. Welcome to An Hour with the Candidates on LPTV, a production of the Libertarian Party, Dan Fishman, executive producer. My name is Pat Ford, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the things I do is I serve as the chair of the Joe Jorgensen campaign for Rhode Island. There are a few purposes for this show. We want to give the libertarian community around the nation the opportunity to meet our wonderful down-ballot candidates. For those of you who have met people, I know none of you are negative. For those of you who have met people, say, where's the down-ballot candidates? Where's the bench? Well, over the last few months, I have had the singular honor of interviewing dozens of people from that bench. And I can tell you, the bench isn't 5 years down the road. The bench isn't 10 years down from that road. The bench is now. We've got wonderful candidates working to get elected, working hard, connecting with their communities, having the difficult conversations, raising those third rail issues that the duopoly would like you to ignore. And it's happening now. We have a conversation where we challenge them to incorporate what I always refer to as lunch pail issues and view them through a libertarian perspective. As I mentioned earlier, of equal importance is to gain an understanding, gain a sense of family, of teamwork. To understand that folks running in this case in places like Florida and Alabama, Kentucky, Rhode Island, across the country, that those candidacies are as important to the libertarian movement, to the promotion of our philosophy as any of your local candidates are. And in doing so, hopefully create a bond that's so important bond where you will consider their candidacies as important as anything that's literally happening at home. So again, if you need that web address, www.lp.org/legal. So let's get down to it. Joining us tonight for the very first time is a gentleman by the name of Chase Oliver. Chase has been an activist, and we'll let him tell his story himself, across an entire range of political issues, caucus issues, throughout the entire libertarian movement. And he's running for a seat. He's running for a seat that really resonates not just for his home state, but, if you will, from a national perspective. Chase Oliver, welcome to An Hour with Candidates.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start from the very beginning and, in a sense, frame the election, then let's talk about you. We've decided, based on the nature of your election, you are running a special election, if you will, that it's critical that we spend a half hour, 40 minutes or so to discuss your race in depth, because, quite frankly, it encompasses a range of issues, a range of perspectives, and, quite frankly, a range of history that is, I believe, unique to yours in just a handful of elections. So let's start by giving us, if you will, a snapshot of who you're running to replace and some of the issues surrounding that. And then I want to talk a little bit more about you.
All right. Well, I'm running in the district special election. Sorry, I'm hearing an echo here a little bit. Okay, thank you. I'm running in the 5th district special election to replace the remaining term of the recently passed John Lewis. As we know, John Lewis was a civil rights icon and a hero and a national figure. So you are correct when you say that this is a seat that extends beyond just the Atlanta region, the District 5 region, but really is a national seat that people look to when it comes to issues like civil rights and criminal justice reform. These are issues that John Lewis was actually kind of a champion of. And while we disagreed on economics and some other things, he has a legacy that is very large. And it's a very large shoe to fill, but I'm looking forward to doing that and speaking to issues that are very important that maybe aren't highlighted enough by the two parties or don't get enough action moving in the Congress. Things like ending qualified immunity, ending no-knock raids, things like demilitarizing the police. Criminal justice is really the main thrust of this campaign because it is what people have been marching in the streets for since the murder of George Floyd earlier this year. So it's very important that I think that we speak to these issues and that we communicate to the voters how these issues are actually important to them. So, yeah.
You know, clearly there are outsized as well influence weighing in on this election. Our president, if you will, and I use that term loosely, decided to take what should have been a soulful, reflective moment upon the passing of Mr. Lewis, and turned it into the circus that, well, he is so apt to do. Do you sense the type of national, if you will, focus on this election that it would seem to be from a political observer's standpoint?
Well, I will say we've gotten a lot of notice in this race. And I certainly, as a libertarian candidate, have had a lot of opportunities to actually speak to the voters in many different voter forums. And I've been interviewed by NPR now. So this race has actually been a very net positive for the Libertarian Party. There's many metrics to victory in this race. First and foremost, I would love to win and represent the 5th District of Georgia as a congressman, the first ever elected Libertarian congressman. But another metric of victory that we've had for this race is actually expanding and improving the image of the Libertarian Party in a city like Atlanta, where, many times people think of libertarians as the old Republicans who smoke weed thing. And I'm glad that I'm actually able to speak to many voters who traditionally have never heard a libertarian and who are now hearing that liberty message for the first time. It's been wonderful. And as far as national indications, I'm hoping that we get a little bit more notice. The more notice we have, the more chance we have to speak liberty in this message to the voters in the 5th District.
To what degree has race played an issue now in the actual election process that you're engaged in? Clearly, we are a nation torn asunder, if you will, by racial issues, racial divide, identity politics. Is that that conversation playing a part in the actual race for Representative Lewis's replacement?
Well, I can say that there are 7 of us in the race. I'm the only white candidate. One of these things is not like the other. But I really don't think that plays a factor in my support. I've been getting support from people of a diverse group of voters. But certainly the issues of Black Lives Matter and these policing issues are one that is very important to the district. I tell people all the time, in my district, we have literally been marching in the streets for these changes since George Floyd was murdered. And it feels like the national politicians in Washington, D.C. are just not hearing this message, and they're not responding to it in a way that is attractive, in a way that is responsive. They're not listening to us. And my goal is to take this voice, this righteous anger that we have all felt towards an authoritarian government, towards the boot of police literally on the neck of people, killing them. I want to take that righteous anger into the halls of Washington, D.C. We have not seen enough action on these things. There's a bill right now that can be voted on to end qualified immunity, but it doesn't go anywhere because the national establishment politicians don't want it to.
And so, as part of your campaign, you're able to really give a unique perspective in a unique environment towards the Libertarian Party's philosophy towards criminal justice, towards really re-engineering, if you will, the entire justice system in this country.
Yeah, I think the message that you're hearing is one of radical change, but changes that have been needing to happen for a long time. I think there's part of the reason why we've seen such uprisings and such protests in this country is that there's just this feeling of frustration that their needs are not being heard. Mm-hmm. And things like ending no-knock raids. This should be a simple thing. We saw Breonna Taylor, who was an EMT during this pandemic, gunned down by police executing a no-knock raid. The person they were looking for wasn't even there. And now we hear that the DA's office was trying to cut a plea deal with the suspect that they were looking for to say, well, if you say, oh, Breonna Taylor was involved in my drug enterprise, we'll give you a lighter sentence. And that's basically to let people off the hook for the wrongs they were doing. It was police after the fact trying to make it seem like it was justified that they committed that raid. And I think what you're seeing so many people frustrated and angry, and rightfully so, that the two-party system is not listening to them anymore, and it's waking people up. And that's actually one of the, as tragic as it is, that's the silver lining of both this pandemic and this movement for criminal justice, is people are waking up to the fact that the two parties are not responsive to the people. They're not listening, and they're not caring. And I care. And that's one of the things that I try to get across. And it's one of the things that I try to say as I speak to voters, is that we care about you. We want you to be free. And the way to do that is to get out of the two-party system.
When you lead with issues on your website, and of course your website is chaseforhouse.com, it's fascinating to me that you lead right to the point. There's a little bit of element of, for lack of a better term, smash mouth politics in terms of your website, which I admire, by the way, because you're going right to the heart of the criminal justice issues. Now, one of the more nuanced points in terms of criminal justice reform, particularly for what we call here in Rhode Island the urban core, is something called ending cash bail. Let's talk about that for a second, how important that is for people in what is generically referred to as the pipeline to prison.
So I want people who are watching this right now to know that right now, approximately there are 500,000 people in jails across this country. And they're in that jail not because they've been convicted of a crime, but because they are too poor to buy the bail that gets them out. Usually it's petty drug crimes, many times victimless crimes that shouldn't be crimes to begin with. But these people are now in jail because they can't afford the cash bail, and they're stuck in jail pre-trial. Now, what happens when you're stuck in jail pre-trial? If you don't have the means, oftentimes you lose your job, you may lose your home, your family, you may lose everything during that time that you wait in jail for pre-trial. But of course, if you have the means, you can just buy your bail and buy your freedom. And that's not really a fair system of justice. That's a two-tiered system of justice, one for people who have the means and one for people who don't have the means. And that's really not what we want to see in our justice system. No other, only one other country on earth really has the cash bail system that we have. That's the Philippines. But all over the rest of the world, we don't have this cash bail system where we criminalize poverty, where we say, oh, well, if you're not rich enough, you have to stay in jail until your trial date. We should really be doing what most countries do. You go in front of a judge. The judge determines if you're a flight risk or if you're a danger to society. If you're not, then you are let go on your own reconnaissance to your trial date. That's how it's done in most of the world. But here in this country, we built this for-profit cash bail system that basically makes its money off of exploiting the poor. And, since I've brought this issue up, I've been attacked online by many people, all of them bail bondsmen. No regular American says it's a good idea for us to keep this two-tier justice system.
Right.
If you ever see any of my social media where I post about cash bail, it's only bail bondsmen who are attacking me because they know that their industry is one that is built off exploiting the poor. And we need to stop that. I support freedom of free markets and free enterprise, but when it comes to criminal justice, we should not be incentivizing people to stay in jail. And that is what the cash bail system does.
If in some circle of hell there is a professional organization for bail bondsmen,
there is.
Have meetings and dinners, I just want to go once just so I can immerse myself in the filth. You're absolutely right. And the importance of this show, as I mentioned in the run-up, was that we talk about everyday issues through a libertarian perspective. And the notion that that our government, and again, out here we call it the pipeline to prison, where folks can be guilty of a civil infraction, which will lead to a fine, which will lead to a suspension, which will lead to criminality, which will lead to cash bail, which will lead to a no-knock raid, which will lead to jail. And again, destroying families, all to serve, if you will, the king. And it can happen to you more quickly than you can ever believe. I'm going to throw a concept at you, and I'd love your explanation of it because you seem like you're directly in touch with what we call here the urban core. Here in Rhode Island, we say it's awfully expensive to be poor. Is it expensive to be poor in your district?
Well, it certainly does not help you to be poor in this district. There is so many areas where it's actually hard to get that first step up. We have in the city, we have cities all across America. This is an issue of being able to start a business, being able to get that first step above being someone else's employee. Entrepreneurship is one thing that I think that we need to be pushing more in the urban cores in cities because that's the way people are going to free themselves from kind of this environment where we have so for instance, say someone wants to start their own business, braiding hair. Braiding hair is a big thing. It's one that we hear a lot about. There's so much red tape involved to start your own business doing that a lot of people don't even bother. They just say, I'm going to go work for somebody else instead of starting my own business. There are so many issues where, it is. And then in terms of criminal justice, certainly it is. It pays to be rich. It helps you if you got money in the legal system. And this is, from everything from your attorney to your cash bail to really the whole system. If you have money, you have influence. And that's really a problem in Atlanta, in the 5th District. We really need to be returning power back to the people. I love that Spike Cohen always talks about how you are the power. The way I describe libertarianism in a way that makes sense to folks is I say, imagine all the power resides in you. We all have these inherent rights. And when we create government, we kind of slice off a piece of our rights and we kind of push it to the government. Okay, here, you create this government framework. And what we've been doing over and over and over for the last 100 years is we've been giving too much of our freedom to a government to protect us or to keep us safe. What we should be doing is we should be saying, no, it's time for us to take some of that power back because you guys have had too much power for too long and you haven't done anything good with it. We want the power back so that way we can live our own lives in the way we want to in peace. So long as we're not hurting anybody or hurting anyone's property or taking anything, we should be allowed to flourish. And right now there are so many barriers to success and barriers to entry in city government, in state government, and certainly in national government, which are the issues that I speak to the most. But if you are poor in the city of Atlanta, it's hard to get through it. Land is expensive, transportation is expensive. It's hard, and I want to provide as many ways for people to make themselves a success. Because right now, government gets in the way too often.
Well, let's talk about the militarization of the police. Folks will often hear me mention on this show that the fact that was actually the Department of Justice actually issued 2 studies post-Ferguson, Missouri, the Ferguson, Missouri riots. And of course, one of them was dedicated to the actual events in the run-up to and during these riots. And of course, that's the prurient type of material that most of our media likes to focus on. We as libertarians are a little bit more thoughtful, and worthy reading is the run-up, if you will, to the social climate and the relationship between the police department and the community as it moved towards these riots. And clearly a polarizing influence in the community was the militarization of the police. Now, post, if you will, Middle Eastern engagements, remember, they've never really been declared wars, have they? But post-military engagements in the Middle East, there has been a tremendous amount of equipment leveraged to our local police departments, armored equipment, advanced weaponry, sophisticated eavesdrop, whatever. How big a part does that play in racial relations, if you will, in the city of Atlanta and more particularly your district?
Well, I tell folks all the time, first off, if you've never had tear gas in your eyes, it is no fun. It is, it's not great. So I can tell you right now from personal experience, I have felt the presence of escalation of force by the police in the city of Atlanta. You know, I've seen National Guard rolling down the streets of my city, which I love. I love Atlanta. You know, we're a city we're the city that's known as the city that's too busy to hate. But when you see National Guard tanks and vehicles rolling down, you know, National Guard armored vehicles rolling down the streets, it really makes you think about, like, this is the center of civil rights. This is the home of Martin Luther King. This is the place where the civil rights struggle of the 1960s was really based. And to see the people being pushed down and their dissent being squashed by this militarized escalation of force on the behalf of police, it's really tragic to see. And you know, I tell people, we're going to make sure that people hear these voices in Washington, D.C. You know, it has been, the government tries to do everything they can to squash dissent, literally with tear gas and police batons. And it's wrong. What it does is it actually makes our communities less safe. Having this escalation of force turns a peaceful protest into something that's more likely to erupt into violence. And what police should be doing is actually working at de-escalating the situation and not escalating the violence. And again, I will tell people in my city, you know, there's a definite diversity when it comes to socioeconomics, and it's not the rich neighborhoods of Atlanta where you see the increasing militarization of police. It's the poor areas of Atlanta, and that's something that we need to speak to as well. And again, it's also not the majority white areas; it's the majority minority areas where you see the most police presence. And of course, you know, people say, well, that's where the crime is. No, that's where the police are. The crime, most of which is nonviolent crime, victimless crime, is committed everywhere. It's just, this is where the police are. That's why you have such disparity when it comes to arrests, when it comes to even cash bail. When we were talking about cash bail earlier, you know, there's a disparity of almost 20% when it comes to the cash bail for a white man having a charge and a black man having that charge, if you look statistically. So again, there's so much two-tier justice in this country, and people are starting to get sick of it. And I'm frankly sick of it too. So yeah, kind of going around to the point of police militarization, this Pentagon to police pipeline needs to stop. And we need to say, why does this exist in the first place? And it's because there are major defense contractors who put the money into these defense bills to get all this equipment built. And then of course, where does the equipment go? Well, we have to do something with it. So they sell it to police departments. What we need to be doing is we need to be stopping this massive buildup of equipment and spending, and really just say, you know, we need to have more cops who actually walk the beat, who actually have the trust in the community again, because that's how you gain trust. And gaining community trust is not only better for the community, it's actually better for the police as well. Their job is safer when the community trusts them. Their job is easier when the community trusts them. But right now they have broken that trust. And if they want that trust, they need to earn it, and they need to put restrictions on their behavior, on their funding, and on their actions. That's what we need to do. Right now, police have free reign thanks to qualified immunity and so many other things that puts them on a plane higher than the average American. And we need to reframe that and put control back to the people and make police understand that they work for us. They are our employees. We are not their subjects.
Folks often talk about defunding the police. I often talk about ending the police. And in my mind, and then I'm going to ask you for your reaction to this and your philosophy, in my mind, that we need to eliminate this sort of top-down, hierarchical, militaristic model of policing in our communities, all communities, and replace it with organizations that are community-driven, focusing on the community's priorities and working alongside of the community to prevent property crime and, of course, violent crime. We instead have this organization which sees itself as everything from moralistic, if you will, imposer of virtue and values, to organizations that are working directly with and on behalf of a government that's been thoroughly corrupted by corporate cronyism and corporate welfare, and supporting redevelopment of urban core for the select few. So I want to end the police, and I want to replace them with something that's community driven that works. But more importantly, as a candidate, what's your philosophy?
Well, I was asked this question recently in a forum, and I believe I was the only one who outright said, yes, defund the police. We need to defund the police. Let's start by defunding the police departments with the $40 billion to get a year in the war on drugs. Let's start defunding police with all the national security, homeland security apparatuses that are supposedly keeping us safe, but really they're, violating so many of our constitutional rights. Let's defund the police when it comes to the Pentagon to police pipeline of military equipment. Yes, defund the police. It is not that hard to explain to people that you want police to be replaced with something that's actually going to stand up for your rights, actually protect your property, actually protect yourself, or actually investigate violent crime, actually do the job that they are supposed to be doing. Right now, police many times are glorified revenue creators. They basically spend their time writing tickets, pulling people over, focusing on things that generate revenue for their jurisdiction, and not actually keeping their jurisdiction safe and really doing the hard work of investigating violent crimes. Every time I see a petty drug arrest, I think, okay, well, that's now time and paperwork that's been taken away from investigating sex crimes or violent crime. Every time I see a victimless crime on the books, I think to myself, well, there's a violent criminal who's on the streets who could have been getting investigated or detained otherwise. I have no problem with police doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is protecting and serving the public, protecting our constitutional rights, and doing right by protecting property and people from violent crime. That is what police are there for. But there's a role for it, but it needs to be massively changed from where it is now, and it needs to have much more of a focus, like you said, on the community and serving the community, and not serving the state and serving this authoritarian kind of structures that we see.
How important, how critical is it that we as libertarians stand with, march with, if necessary, engage in peaceful civil disobedience with members of these communities that have been marginalized by an oppressive government and even more oppressive criminal justice system?
Yeah. Well, I feel a lot of empathy. I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, so I know what it's like to suffer discrimination for no reason other than the fact that you are who you are, something you can't change about yourself. Mm-hmm. And I understand what it's like to have government kind of oppress that. Now, over the last few years, we've seen many strides forward in the realm of LGBTQ rights. There's still much more to speak on. While we're speaking on issues, like I tell people all the time, all lives won't matter until Black lives matter, and Black lives won't matter until Black trans lives matter. Because we have this massive trans violence going on across the country. It's an epidemic of its own in this trans violence. So I understand and empathize with being a part of a community that is oftentimes marginalized, misunderstood, misrepresented in government. I understand that. And I want to take those activist voices to Washington, D.C. And the truth is that, I am not a person of color. But what I am is someone who sees these systems oppressing people and who's sick and tired of it. And I don't want people to look at me and think, oh, he's a white guy. He's obviously on the side of the police. Absolutely not. I'm on the side of every person who's been oppressed by government. I want to fight for their rights. They are my rights too. I want to fight for everyone to be able to live free and peaceful. And again, I understand what it means to come from a community where government literally oppresses you. Right now we have people all over the country who are being oppressed as trans individuals who can't serve in the military. There's these bathroom bills. There's all this kind of stuff that basically marginalizes members of the LGBTQ community. And I empathize with any community that is under the oppressive boot of government. Really, we all are. Some of us are just under the boot a little bit more than others. And we need to understand that, and we need to listen to those stories and listen to that and understand it properly for liberty for everyone.
Folks, if you're just joining us, You are listening to An Hour with the Candidates on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television. Executive producer Dan Fishman. My name is Pat Ford. I currently serve, among other things, as the chairman of the Joe Jorgensen campaign for the great state of Rhode Island, which seems to have been in the news over the last few days. All of a sudden, folks are calling us, reaching out to us. Imagine that. Chase Oliver is on the line. He's running for the United States House District 5 in the great state of Georgia. A replacement race, a special election made very, special because of who he's replacing. Of course, we're talking about the civil rights advocate, John Lewis, who amongst libertarian circles clearly is looked at, with two perspectives. And I believe in admiration for his personal bravery in fighting for racial justice and equality. And of course, question marks about his economic and political philosophies. That being said, this is a seminal race here in the United States. It's being watched nationally, if not internationally. And Chase's presence obviously represents a clear opportunity to move forward with the libertarian perspective philosophy amongst a greater audience. Before he goes tonight, we will engage, as we always do, in shameless acts of self-promotion. So you, as a libertarian, can help support him in his, in really a real challenge to gain a greater share of the public eye. We've been talking a lot. We ran right into the issues of criminal justice just because of the way that Chase is focusing on it, not just for his district, but on his website and being so forward-facing about those issues. Chase, you're also active in you're very involved in the Outright Libertarian Forum. One of the issues facing our American Congress, and you are running for the United States Congress, so this question is very appropriate to you. There is currently ongoing a war on sex work. And why, for the average American living in, Providence, Rhode Island at their dinner table, why should they, one would ask, why would they be concerned about that? Well, if you look at the war on drugs, the war on sex work is following in lockstep. Legislation like FOSTA and SESTA has been passed, which, is a grotesque attack on our American civil liberties, our First Amendment rights, but it's also a direct shot at sex workers, particularly in the trans community, who have now been placed in immense danger for fulfilling a role that is clearly, given the billions of dollars spent on sex in America, clearly valued, yet often disparaged and ignored. What are your thoughts on the war on sex work here in the United States?
Well, I will say first and foremost, I'm extremely happy to be a member of the Libertarian Party because we are the only party in the country that in our platform stands up for the rights of sex workers. We all have that right. I mean, sex work is work and it should be legal. And here's why. If you are just someone saying, why should sex work be legal? Well, the truth is any sex between two consenting adults should be completely legal. And when you remove that criminalization from the picture, what you then are left with is the ability to focus on and investigate sex crimes against unwilling people who are not consenting, both adults and children, trafficking. That's why you legalize consenting sex between adults and legal sex work. Is because then you can crack down on the actual problems of trafficking and sex abuse that happens, and it does happen. But what happens is, but the thing is when you take your eye off the ball of trafficking and just put it over sex work as a whole, you kind of lose focus on the area where there are really victims. And then people all the time, why should sex work be legal? Well, it already kind of is if you have a camera in the room and if you're shooting it for a website. So to me, it makes no sense that we should be outlawing sex work. And it also, you're right, it does affect the trans community because there are folks in the trans community who are sex workers, but it really affects everyone. But the trans community is being targeted. If you look at what happens many times, trans women are being arrested, sometimes put into men's prisons. If you want to look at Kamala Harris's record as AG of California, you can see a lot of stuff in her past. It's not exactly super trans friendly, just throwing that out there. But I will say sex work is something that should be legal, again, so law enforcement can focus on actual crimes with actual victims. You should not be able to, it should not be illegal for you to say, I want to have sex to make the rent because I need to pay the rent or need to put food on my table. We all have agency within ourselves. We all have the ability to use our bodies to make money, and sex should be really no different. The problem, the reason why it's treated differently, obviously, is because we have these societal hangups about sex. We come from a Puritan found nation. It just kind of trickles down over the last few hundred years. But I'm hoping that we can see, much like in the 1960s and 70s when we had a kind of a sexual revolution. I'm hoping we can have the same thing around in the 2020s to broaden the horizons of sexuality and sexual understanding. This is something that, and of course you mentioned outright libertarians. I do want to really quickly talk about who they are. Outright libertarians, we are a charity who is devoted to increasing awareness of GSM, that's gender and sexual minority issues, to not only libertarians and libertarian candidates, to help educate them on the issues, but then to also be a bridgeway between the GSM community to the Libertarian Party, saying, hey, you don't have to just be a Republican or a Democrat to be politically active as a gender and sexual minority. There's another party here who has been on the side of pro-GSM rights since its founding in the 1970s. So one of the things I do, I recommend that everybody check out Outright Libertarians. Outright Libertarians is a fantastic group. We are trying to fight for GSM equality and fight for GSM education. So if you can check us out on Facebook, Outright Libertarians is a wonderful group. We have an amazing board chaired by the wonderful Ashley Shade. If you know her, she's fantastic. But really, I enjoy working with Outright because I want to grow this party and I want to make this party more accepting for everyone. And that goes for our GSM brothers and sisters as well.
Excellent. Normally we open up with a conversation about the candidate. So we went a little bit in reverse this week because of the focus on your work and your perspective on the criminal justice system. Giving that is, around America right now, when you come to the realization that in cities like Kenosha, Wisconsin, that you've got significant and violent upheaval because of racial issues, you come to terms with the fact that this is no longer just a big city, isolated, manipulated by one organization, quote unquote, wild theorization, that it is literally part of our fabric as a country every day. And we as a party and a philosophy need to understand that so that we can be part of that conversation. So I applaud your aggressive stance on those issues. But let's talk a little bit about you. One of the questions we often ask candidates is, what was that libertarian moment? Chase Oliver, tell us about your background and when did you all of a sudden wake up and say, oh, damn, I'm a libertarian. I'm not one of those. I can't go the easy way with the Republican and Democratic Party. I have to stand on principle and I have to fight a really good, hard, long fight. Tell us about yourself, Chase.
So my journey to libertarianism is pretty simple. So, I want to say first, in 2008, I was an Obama voter. I've already voted for Joe Biden once. I'm never doing it again. But I was an Obama voter in 2008, and that's because I was an anti-war voter. In the 2000s, I saw Bush starting the Iraq War and this increased militarization. I thought, I got to vote for the other guy. Hope and change, right? And so I voted for Obama. Obama got elected. And then I saw the wars did not end. The drone bombing started to increase. Gitmo was not closing. All these issues that I voted for, these ardent anti-war issues that I voted for, were not getting fulfilled by the Obama administration. And so I started becoming very politically apathetic. I probably would be a non-voter right now if it weren't for the fact that in 2010, I was at the Atlanta Pride Festival and the Libertarian Party of Georgia, and its candidate for governor, John Mons, was there speaking about libertarianism, speaking about these issues. I actually got to sit down and listen and talk with these folks. And I realized, hey, maybe I'm a libertarian. And so I kind of did my research. I decided then and there I was going to vote for John Mons. I was like, this guy's actually at the Pride festivities trying to get votes. He's earned my vote, so I'm going to vote for him. So that was my first libertarian vote. And throughout the next couple of years, I kind of educated myself and I became a libertarian. I self-identified as a libertarian in the run-up to the 2012 election, which was my first libertarian vote for president. So it has been a journey from the left. Many times people come to libertarianism from the right, from the Republican Party. I do want to let people know that, there are certainly people who come here from the left, from the Democrats as well. And I'm one of those people. And I've noticed some people in the chat and comments have been saying things like, talk about the wasted vote. Like, is it a wasted vote to vote libertarian or whatever? Well, I want to speak to two things. First off, in my race, there's no Republican. There's 5 Democrats, there's an independent, and there's me. So you don't have to worry about wasting your vote or losing out to the Republicans. I'm the only non-Democrat in the race. That being said, I want to earn everybody's vote. I don't want my vote to be expected. I want my votes to be earned. And I think that's one of the messages you can send by voting outside of the two-party system. What you do when you vote for libertarians, or really anybody who's not a Republican or Democrat, you tell those two establishment parties that we are tired of what you're selling us. We want something different, and you're not providing it, so we're going to go somewhere else. And in the long run, that's actually going to hopefully not only give us success as libertarians, but also speak to the issues. And maybe, I tell people all the time, the libertarians, we're the creek before the river. Before you have a river, you have to have the creek that carves the path. And we are that creek. We carve that path. We talk about the issues decades ahead of everyone else. The drug war, decades ahead. Gay rights, decades ahead. Anti-war, decades ahead. So we are actually kind of helping create the mainstream that's going to be coming behind us. And even as we grow and as our influence grows, we're going to break down that two-party divide, and we're going to start having a multi-party coalition in this country. I sincerely believe that. I see so many people frustrated with the two-party system. So yeah, down with the duopoly. Let's change people's minds and let's change people's opinions.
Let's do a deep dive into your anti-war sentiment. It's one of the beautiful parts of this presidential campaign is the focus on the anti-war movement. That's such a fundamental part of the libertarian philosophy and the libertarian community. Regardless of how many different takes folk can have on any one of 100 issues within the political conversation today, the one thing about libertarians that brings us together is our solidarity on ending war now. How did you arrive at that position in your life? What is your theories on our exist? Because you're running for Congress, and this is part of the big conversation that needs to take place. So when, if you're like me, you've got the button, I want to end the next war. I'm already against the next war. 100 different takes on it. How do we end the next war? And what's your thoughts on American foreign policy right now?
Well, what kind of got me into the anti-war movement was, of course, I was in high school when 9/11 happened. I was a junior in high school at the time. And, I saw a lot of my friends and peers in school saying, well, I'm going to sign up for the military, man. I got to go fight the terrorists over there. And, over the years, as that went on, I kept thinking to myself, like, what are they really fighting for over there? Like, what's really going on? How many people do I know that have suffered being in the military and being forced to go into a war zone? I have friends who have health problems. They have PTSD. They have lots of problems that come from this foreign policy. And what really got me into the peace movement is understanding that we're never really going to be a world at peace so long as we are continuously at war. And that the best way to spread American exceptionalism, is not through the barrel of a gun, but through marketplace trading and through expanding our trade relations with other people. And that really peace is the best way to create stability in the world. I find it odd that so many people think that that's kind of a crazy notion. But we really need to stop being the policeman of the world. We really need to be looking at other nations as, we're not above other nations. We're just a nation amongst the community of nations. Now, we're the most powerful nation. We're the richest nation. We have the most powerful military. We have all these things. But at the end of the day, we are not the world's policeman. It's not our job to be, making sure the rest of the world is not at war. I mean, by being at war with everyone, that doesn't make any sense. And then at the end of the day, I want people to understand that we do not have to be at war. And if we are talking about things like Black Lives Matter, Black lives don't just matter in the criminal justice system of the United States. Black and brown lives matter when we're bombing them with drone bombs. Imagine being somebody who's just living their life in Pakistan. Imagine you're going to the market with your family, and it just so happens there's somebody there that the United States government wants dead in that marketplace, and a drone bombs it and kills your family. That really happens. That really happens all over the world. And, one of the things that I want to do when I talk about war is I want to connect people with that actual thing that happens. Too much, there's a disconnect. I think a lot of it has to do with drone warfare too. It's kind of a video game style warfare where you're just flying a plane, launching a missile. It's very impersonal. But the truth is that people's lives are lost. And something like 80% was collateral damage during the Obama administration during drone bombs. I'm sure it's the same under Trump. That's way too many innocent people. Even if you are killing people who are enemy combatants in the United States, like really want to do bad things, this policy, these things that we're doing are actually making things worse and destabilizing that region of the world. It's not going to help. It's not going to help. So that's my message that I give to people all the time, is that if you really want a peaceful world, then we have to demand an end to war.
Have Americans become anesthetized to the notion of foreign death, much like a video game, as you described?
What's that?
Have Americans become, in a sense, anesthetized to foreign death in these video game drone-style warfare that you just talked about?
Yeah, I think there's just a disconnect. People don't really think about the actual consequences of our foreign policy. You know, they see it as, oh, well, we're keeping America safe. But the truth is that we're killing a lot of innocent people. And those people have as much right to life and liberty as you or I do. You know, we all have an inherent right to life and liberty. That's part of the inherent rights that we always talk about. And whether you are me or whether you are a young person or really any person in Pakistan or Syria or Libya or Iraq or Afghanistan or any of these places where we've been fighting these wars for the last 2 decades now. You know, I try to tell people all the time, one of my friend's kids, they were born on 9/12/2001, the day after 9/11. They were literally born into the world, the post 9/11 world. And now she's old enough to have been serving in the military for well over a year now. You know, we should not be having generational wars in this country. It's not right. It's not normal. And that's the problem. And I think the further we get away from 9/11 and the further we continue this perpetual warfare, the harder it's going to be for the American people to realize that this is not normal. This was never normal. This is abnormal, and we need to change it.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, and we want to make sure that we give you ample time to engage in what we've referred to in the show as shameless self-promotion. We've talked about criminal justice extensively, and of course, your philosophy on peace. If there was any next issue as a congressman, and sometimes the way I like to frame it is, if you had your dream role in Congress, and let's just say it couldn't be in criminal justice, and for the time being, it might not be in foreign affairs, but what are your other lunch pail issues, if you will? What motivates you to commit to a very public, challenging run for the United States Congress?
Well, there's a lot of issues out there, obviously. But one issue that I know is very important to the people in my district, and one of the things I've talked about, is voting rights. The disenfranchisement of people, it's a big issue here in Georgia. It's an issue, of course, all over the country. But the Voting Rights Act being tossed out in 2015 by the Supreme Court, you know, the justification for that is that the Voting Rights Act only targeted the Jim Crow South in terms of, you know, enforcing these measures against repression of the vote. So one of the things that I want to talk about, and one of the things that I would like to see, you know, they're talking about reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act and naming it the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I would really like to see that expanded to 50 states, because the truth is that while there is voting disenfranchisement here in Georgia, it really happens all over the country that there are people who are losing their right to vote. This also is a criminal justice issue, giving felons the right to vote when they're done serving their time, so to speak. But I really want to speak to getting voters engaged in voting, understanding the value of your vote, and understanding that everyone has the right to vote. This is something that, you know, I try to talk about more choices and more voices in my election all the time. When I say more choices and more voices, I mean that so often people are not even represented at the ballot box. Voter suppression has its own ugly head in the terms of ballot access. It's very hard to get on the ballot here in Georgia. The reason why I'm only the second libertarian to ever run for Congress in Georgia is because of the cumbersome ballot access requirements that are required to even get on the ballot to begin with. That is its own form of voter suppression. When you look at state assembly and state senate races here in Georgia, more often than not, you have one choice on the ballot in November, and this is because of gerrymandering and because of ballot access requirements. I think it should be easier for more choices and more voices to show up in the political process. And that's what I want to see here in Georgia. So any movement that can increase ballot access for candidates, but also ensure that every American has the right to vote, those are issues that are very important to me, because it's only once all our voices are heard that we're really going to get things done.
That's outstanding. You know, as we conclude, if you will, stage one of our ballot access drive here for 2020, I had the opportunity recently on television to challenge my Republican and Democratic counterparts here in here in Rhode Island. And I mentioned them that as a nation, as a society, we're working overtime to ensure the access to voting that every American deserves, whether that be by mail ballots, whether that be early voting, whatever we need to do. But at the same time, if you, through the use of these nefarious ballot access laws for candidates, if at the same time you are going to prevent folks from having the full range of choices for any one of these candidacies, what have you really accomplished? I use the D word. I'll put that out there for a second. Disenfranchisement. So when I turned to Faze, the Democratic state coordinator for Rhode Island, I told her she was actively engaged in disenfranchising voters. You should have seen the look on her face, because no good liberal Democrat would ever disenfranchise anybody. No good flag-bearing, Trump-toting Republican would ever disenfranchise anyone. Yet at the same time, across America, as we found out over the last few weeks here in Rhode Island, and as folks have found out across the country, and as folks are living the nightmare in Texas as we speak, there is active disenfranchisement being taken place. One can, if one wanted to be dramatic, promote that it's almost akin to the old Soviet system, where sure, everybody could vote. Everybody could only vote for one person, though. So I like the way that you term. How did you do that? More voices and more choices?
Yeah, more choices, more voices. We need more choices on the ballot and more voices in the discussion and the debate. And I've been really happy that many Democrats have invited me to their forums to speak. I imagine it's a lot of times Democrats have first ever gotten to hear from a libertarian, actually out of their own mouth, as opposed to hearing what other people say about libertarians. And so I've been very blessed to be involved in a lot of the debate. I think it would be nice if Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen could be involved in their debate too. I don't see what's so afraid of a little bit of competition at the debate. And maybe they're cowards, Biden and Trump. I don't know. But if they want to prove me wrong, they could always let Joe Jorgensen on the stage. Now, I do want to shamelessly self-promote myself a little bit. My race is before November. Before you vote for Joe Jorgensen in November, if you live in the 5th district in Atlanta, Fulton County, DeKalb County, Northern Clayton County, you need to get out and vote September 29th for Chase Oliver. September 29th is my election day. But early voting starts September the 8th. So if you want to go ahead and bank that libertarian vote ahead of time, go ahead and do it. And then start talking to your friends and neighbors about getting them out to early vote as well. This is a race that is totally winnable if we get out the vote, because it's on a random Tuesday in September. It is a special election. So for every time you get out to vote, it's actually much more important, because the terms of the percentage of people who are actually going to get out to vote in this race is going to be much lower than you think. So every vote counts in this race. And I hope to earn every vote that I can. And if you want to help me get the message out, go to chaseforhouse.com, and especially chaseforhouse.com/donate. If you can donate to this campaign, it's going to help me get the mailers that I need to let voters know that early voting has started and to get out and vote. It's going to speak to the issues. It's going to help me get the yard signs I need. I got yard signs coming in right now, but I can always use more and more 4x6s for when I table out in the park. Things like this. These are real things. Every dollar is going to help spread the message of liberty. And win, lose, or draw in this race, I have several metrics of success. One of them being, of course, I want to win this race. I want to serve the people of the 5th district as their next congressman. But I also want to spread the message of liberty to as many people as possible, win, lose, or draw in this race. I want to improve the image of libertarianism in cities like Atlanta. And you can help me do that by going to chaseforhouse.com/donate. You will hear from me and you will hear about the issues that are important. But if I don't have the means to do that, it's going to be really hard for me to get that vote out in September. And I really need your help to do that.
Chase Oliver, outstanding. This is why when I talk about the bench, the folks running for quote unquote down ballot access, down ballot races, down ballot candidacies, this is a congressman in the future. This is someone who can represent districts now, who's got a clear handle on the issues, a clear handle on the libertarian perspective, and quite frankly has the talent to change lives now. There are Chase Olivers all over the Libertarian Party. The purpose of this show is to support them. Folks, again, I know tonight sounds like a little bit of a telethon. Yeah, there's an element to that. Not going to apologize for that. We need to participate. We need to invest in candidacies like Chase's and the candidacies that we've had on over the last several weeks. It's critical to the future of the movement. It's clear from his conversation tonight that the moment is now. We've got the right time. We've got the right person. We've got the right place. We've got the right candidacy. Let's not wait. Let's grab opportunities like this now to pursue a libertarian world where we can have peace and freedom in our time. Chase, I'm just going to end with a couple of show comments, but again, congratulations on your effort. I regardless of the outcome, you've accomplished all of it already. We are a better movement. We are a better force for good. We are a stronger philosophy on the streets of Atlanta because of your candidacy. So I congratulate you for that effort. On a couple of notes, at about 9:15 on Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, we will be having Richard Manzo on the Joe campaign update. Something we do for about a half hour after this show every week. I want to end a little bit of a speech/plea that I opened up the show with. The end of the story. How did the movie end? Well, thanks to the work of volunteers in Rhode Island and volunteers from literally around the country, showing up in Rhode Island, pitching in, doing the hard work of democracy, really the grunt work, if you will, because the type of things we've been talking over the last few weeks in terms of campaign access, ballot access, this is the hard work of democracy. Because of that, we got somewhere between 18 and 1,900 signatures for a 1,000 signature requirement. So while we have to go through the process now, the signature validity, the exhaustive town clerk inquiries, if you will, that are going to take place all over Rhode Island in the coming week or so, we were already grown as a movement because of what happened. So again, I want to thank Bill Redpath. I want to thank the Libertarian Party for the support for the Joe campaign here in the great state of Rhode Island. Without your work here and across the nation, again, states everywhere, we would not have the potential to be a 50-state movement in this most difficult of years. The notion that we've got the real possibility on being on 50 ballots plus the District of Columbia during the middle of a pandemic, racial upheavals this country hasn't seen for a generation, wars, pestilence, is a testament to the libertarian spirit. So as we go forward, let's celebrate that. Let's take a moment and relish the notion that we are, in fact, a family. Take a little bit of time, whether if you can contribute to Chase's campaign, if you can contribute to the Libertarian Party through time or money, it's all very, very valuable. And it's those efforts that make us special. Thank you for joining us tonight. You spent some time with An Hour with the Candidates, a production of LPTV, Libertarian Party Television. Executive producer, good old executive director Dan, joining us again. This was his idea. And again, every week I want to take the opportunity to thank him for this and bringing this fruition. My name is Pat Ford. We'll see you next Friday night at 8 o'clock.